The greatest, the most destructive machines of the universe were not brought down by human ingenuity.
Right. Or military might.
No, not at all. Or even the atomic bomb.
Yeah. They were defeated by the absolute smallest, most overlooked, completely invisible things on planet Earth.
Think about that for a second. The very things we, wipe off our kitchen counters without a second thought.
Exactly.
Those were the only defense that actually worked when the end of the world arrived.
It is wild when you really frame it that way.
It really is. So, welcome. Come on in. Take a seat. You are joining us right here in the little station on Commercial Street in Atchison, Kansas.
The home of Chesterton Radio.
Yes. And it is beautifully quiet in our comm room tonight. If you look around, you'll see our usual eclectic mess.
A beautiful mess, I like to think.
Definitely. We've got stacks of dog-eared, century-old books leaning against vintage radio scripts. Over there, star charts and history texts are sharing shelf space with philosophical treatises.
It's a space where old books, old radio, history, faith, technology, and, the relentless march of the modern world all sit around the same heavy wooden table.
And tonight, we've cleared the center of this table for you because we have an incredible mystery of cultural reflection to unpack in this deep dive.
We do. Sitting right here in front of us are 3 distinct artifacts, 3 primary sources that tell the exact same story of a Martian invasion.
But they belong to 3 completely different worlds.
Right. We have H.G. Wells' original 1898 novel.
Classic.
Then the script of Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater's famous 1938 radio broadcast.
And finally, the transcript of the 1955 Lux Radio Theatre production starring Dana Andrews.
So our mission tonight is to figure out how this one story mutated and changed as it was, dragged through Victorian Britain, American radio on the brink of World War II, and Atomic Age Cold War America.
But we aren't just looking at the plot here. We really want to know what each version reveals about what its own age secretly feared.
Yes, the cultural anxieties baked into them.
Exactly. And I want to start by throwing us directly into the deep end of 1898.
Let's do it.
So, put yourself in late 19th century England. You are sitting at the absolute epicenter of the British Empire.
The global superpower of the day.
Right. This is an era defined by a seemingly unstoppable industrial revolution. But Wells doesn't open his novel by celebrating that, does he?
No, not at all. He opens it by dissecting something he calls complacency.
Complacency.
Yeah, and it is arguably one of the most brilliant openings in science fiction history because it targets the psychology of the reader immediately.
I mean, the wording is just perfect.
It really is. He describes how, with infinite complacency, people went to and fro over the globe about their little affairs, serene in their assurance of their empire over matter.
Their empire over matter. That is such a loaded phrase.
Totally. To understand the mechanism of that complacency, you have to really understand the psychological insulation of the Victorian mind.
Because they hadn't just built factories, right?
Right. They believed they had fundamentally conquered the natural world.
The railways, the telegraphs, the ironclad ship.
Exactly. Those weren't just tools to them. They were evidence of a permanent, unshakable mastery over reality itself.
They assumed the universe was just this closed, solved system with humanity sitting comfortably at the very top.
Yeah, neat little hierarchy.
But wait, I have to push back a little. Are we giving Wells too much credit here as a philosopher?
Yeah, what do you mean?
Well, looking at the Victorian publishing market, wasn't he just writing a gripping, pulpy biological thriller to sell magazines?
Yeah.
Like, is he actively trying to humiliate the Victorian ego right out of the gate?
Oh, I think he is absolutely trying to humiliate that ego, and he does it through the mechanism of scale.
Scale, okay, unpack that.
So Wells was a student of T.H. Huxley, right? He was deeply steeped in evolutionary theory. He doesn't just want to scare you with aliens.
He wants to mess with your worldview.
Exactly. He wants to strip away the illusion of human exceptionalism, and he does this right away by comparing humanity to infusoria under the microscope.
Infusoria, so like microscopic organisms.
Yeah. He forces the Victorian reader, who, probably fancied himself a gentleman of science, to imagine the universe looking back at him.
That is such a vivid, humbling image. Because when you look through a microscope, you feel sort of godlike.
You do. You have total control.
Right. You are observing this tiny, chaotic world in a drop of water, completely detached from it. But Wells flips the lens.
He flicks it entirely.
He says to the reader, no, you are the microscopic transient creature swarming in that water. You just don't know the slide has been placed under the lens yet.
Precisely. And he compounds that by comparing humans to monkeys and lemurs.
Wow. Yeah, taking us right back down the evolutionary ladder.
He forces humanity to look at itself the way humanity looks at the animal kingdom. And then, he presents Mars.
Right, and Mars isn't just a place.
No, Mars is not some vibrant new frontier to be conquered, based on the nebular hypothesis popular at the time.
Which suggested that because Mars is smaller and further from the sun, it cooled faster.
Exactly. So Wells presents Mars as an older, dying world. It is much further along in its evolutionary timeline.
Its oceans have shrunk, its atmosphere is thin.
The Martians are desperate. They look sunward toward our green, warm, fertile Earth.
And because they are further along in their evolution, they look at us exactly the way we look at beasts in the jungle.
Right. Which brings up something in the text that I found genuinely shocking when I first read it.
What's that?
Wells explicitly points a mirror at British imperialism. He brings up the complete extermination of the Tasmanians by European immigrants.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a staggering psychological critique for 1898.
It really is. Wells essentially asks the reader, are we such apostles of mercy as to complain if the Martians warred in the same spirit?
So the profound thematic shock of the novel is that the British Empire, the ultimate colonizer, suddenly experiences the absolute terror of being colonized.
Exactly. The Martians are not doing anything to humanity that humanity hasn't already done to its own indigenous populations,
Right.
or to the dodo or the bison.
Right, the heat ray and the black smoke are just technologically advanced versions of the rifles and cannons the British used to conquer the globe.
That's spot on.
But what really fascinates me is how the human mind actually processes that collapse.
Oh, the psychological fallout.
Yeah. When the entire framework of your civilization is just casually stepped on, how do you react?
Well, Wells gives us two incredible character studies here, right? The curate and the artilleryman.
Yes. Let's dig into the curate first. Why does his mind completely snap?
Because the curate represents the total collapse of traditional Victorian religious and moral frameworks when confronted with an indifferent, hostile universe.
He can't handle it.
No. When the Martian cylinders land and the devastation begins, the curate cannot process it mechanically or scientifically.
He views the invasion strictly through a framework of biblical punishment, right?
Exactly. He wails about Sodom and Gomorrah, begging to know what sins they have committed to bring this fire and earthquake down upon them.
It's because his worldview is totally transactional.
Transactional, that's a good word for it.
In his mind, bad things only happen if you have angered God. Therefore, this must be a punishment.
Right. The narrator actually tries to reason with him, saying that this isn't a divine judgment, it's just a vastly superior physical force.
So the curate's mental framework is so rigid.
So rigid, it's incapable of accommodating the idea that the universe might just be chaotic and dangerous.
So when the framework breaks, his sanity shatters with it.
Exactly. The curate is paralyzed by the past, but contrast that with the artilleryman, who is an incredibly chilling vision of the future.
Yeah, the artilleryman survives the initial assault by instantly accepting the new reality.
He doesn't mourn the empire at all.
No. He tells the narrator, it never was a war, any more than there's a war between man and ants.
He fully accepts that humanity has been permanently demoted on the food chain.
But hold on, I'm stuck on the artilleryman's logic for the future here. Because he has this massive monologue where he predicts the Martians will start farming humans.
Yeah, it's pretty dark.
He says, they will pen us in nice roomy cages, give us fattening food, and breed us carefully. And the terrifying part is, he thinks most people will happily accept this.
He does.
But why? Why would commuters and clerks prefer cages and being eaten over fighting for freedom? It sounds like madness in a different font.
It is a proto-fascist survivalist mentality, and it preys entirely on the psychology of safety.
Safety over freedom.
Right. The artilleryman recognizes that Victorian society was already a cage. He points out all those complacent clerks and commuters who spent their whole lives running to catch the train.
Terrified of being late.
Terrified of being late, terrified of losing their jobs, just living for their little season ticket existence.
So he argues that they are already tamed.
Exactly. They don't know how to survive. They only know how to obey structures.
So when the Martians offer them a new structure, even one that eventually leads to the slaughterhouse, they will welcome it because it removes the burden of freedom.
And the terror of the unknown.
That is incredibly bleak.
It is. He essentially wants to gather the strong men and clean-minded women, abandon art and music, and just live like rats in the sewers to preserve the species.
He wants to throw away everything that makes us human, just to keep the biological machinery running.
And through both of these characters, Wells is forcing his readers to confront their own fragility.
He strips away the physical security of the British military, showing their cannons brushed aside like toys.
But more importantly, he strips away the psychological security of their religious and social institutions.
So that Victorian illusion of security was shattered by imagining a massive, undeniable physical threat from above.
Right.
But as we move our focus across the table to our second artifact, the 1938 Orson Welles and the Mercury Theatre broadcast, the nature of the fear fundamentally shifts.
It really does.
We aren't in a colonial empire anymore. We're in an American living room.
A very different space.
And the threat isn't just physical, it's psychological. The terror is embedded in the very technology people trusted to tell them the truth about the world.
The great innovation of the 1938 broadcast is not simply changing the setting from Victorian England to contemporary America.
Right, it's not just a location swap.
No, the genius is that the medium of radio itself becomes a character in the story. In many ways, the radio is the monster.
I love that.
Yeah.
Orson Welles disguised a science fiction invasion as a real-time, completely mundane interruption of an ordinary Sunday evening.
Yeah, put yourself in that 1938 living room for a second.
Okay, I'm there.
You're sitting on your rug, staring at that glowing wooden radio dial. You tune in and hear a totally standard, boring announcer say they are taking you to the Meridian Room in the Hotel Park Plaza in downtown New York.
Right, for the music of Ramon Raquello and his orchestra.
Exactly. It's just soothing, normal dance music. It lulls you into a false sense of absolute security.
The pacing here is agonizingly perfect. It weaponizes the immediacy of radio.
It does. You get the dance music. Then an abrupt interruption, a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News.
About a professor in Chicago noticing incandescent gas on Mars.
Right. And this is crucial, they go right back to the music.
They play Stardust.
Yes. They don't immediately jump into the invasion. They let the listener sit in this awkward, liminal space of uncertainty.
We have to dive into the mechanics of the sound design here, because they don't just tell you things are happening.
They trick your brain into experiencing them.
Yeah. Take the scene where the reporter, Carl Phillips, goes to the Princeton Observatory to interview Professor Pearson. You hear this steady, mechanical ticking of the clockwork, moving the giant telescope.
Just a ticking sound.
Yeah. Why does a simple ticking sound induce so much anxiety?
Because ticking implies a countdown. It implies a mechanical inevitability.
The sound design is really a masterclass in Foley art and psychological manipulation.
Oh, absolutely. When the broadcast shifts to the Wilmoth Farm at Grover's Mill, New Jersey, they create a deeply unsettling audio realism.
You hear the ambient crowd noises, the police sirens in the distance.
And then that horrific scraping sound.
Ugh, the top of the cylinder unscrewing.
It just grates on your nerves.
It is iconic, but for me, the real terror is Carl Phillips's voice.
Yeah.
The actor plays it so perfectly.
He really struggles to describe what he is seeing.
He stammers. He says he sees luminous discs for eyes, a V-shaped mouth dripping saliva. His voice is literally trembling.
And then they deploy the heat ray.
Right. Carl Phillips is describing the Martians. The crowd is panicking. The police are yelling. You hear a hum, a description of green smoke, screams, flames, and then...
The microphone cuts out.
Yeah. But they don't jump straight back to the studio announcer. They give you dead air.
That silence is the most terrifying sound in the entire broadcast.
Why, though? I mean, today, if a screen goes black or a YouTube stream drops, we just sigh and think it's a Wi-Fi glitch.
We just refresh the page.
Right, we refresh it. But in the golden age of radio, dead air was an entirely different psychological beast.
In 1938, dead air meant something was catastrophically wrong. Radio was a live, continuous stream of assurance.
So if a broadcast dropped, it meant the physical infrastructure connecting you to the outside world had been severed.
Exactly. Leaving the listener in that silence, alone in their living room with just the hum of the vacuum tubes, forces their own imagination to do the horrific work.
It creates an auditory hallucination where the silence itself is the proof of death.
That's a great way to put it.
I think we need to carefully dissect the public reaction to this broadcast, though.
We definitely should.
Because there is a deeply entrenched mythology that this broadcast caused the entire nation to panic. You always hear stories that millions of people were running into the streets, carrying their hair out.
Convinced the world was ending, right?
Yeah. But the historical reality is much more nuanced, isn't it?
It is, and it reveals a lot about the media landscape of the time. There were absolutely documented cases of frightened listeners.
Police switchboards in New Jersey and New York were overwhelmed with callers.
Some people did pack their cars and flee, but the narrative of mass, nationwide hysteria, the idea of millions panicking, was greatly exaggerated the next day by the newspaper industry.
Wait, the newspapers exaggerated it on purpose. Why would they do that?
Because newspapers were terrified of radio.
Oh, of course. Market competition.
Exactly. Radio was a new, competing medium that was stealing their advertising revenue and their monopoly on breaking news.
So when this broadcast happened, the print media seized the opportunity to paint radio as an irresponsible, dangerous, unregulated toy that couldn't be trusted.
They amplified the stories of panic to discredit radio as a legitimate news source.
That is fascinating. It's an early media war.
It really is.
But even if it wasn't millions, we still have to ask why the people who did panic were so primed to believe it.
It's a fair question.
Why would a rational person in 1938 believe aliens were landing in New Jersey?
It comes down to trust in the medium and the acute anxiety of the era. You have to remember the context. It is October 1938.
The Munich crisis had just happened.
Hitler was mobilizing, and the Hindenburg disaster, which was famously broadcast live on the radio with the announcer breaking down in tears, was fresh in everyone's memory.
Oh, wow. So listeners were completely accustomed to having their regular dance music interrupted by terrifying, world-altering news.
They were conditioned to fear the special bulletin.
And Orson Welles knew exactly what he was doing. He leans heavily into the voice of authority.
He uses a perfectly calm, authoritative studio announcer to anchor the chaos.
He brings on an astronomer from Princeton because science was the ultimate authority.
And later in the broadcast, they bring on the Secretary of the Interior,
who sounded suspiciously like President Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Very suspiciously. And he tells the nation to place their faith in God and the military.
So if the radio, the scientists, and the government are all telling you the world is ending, why wouldn't you believe it?
The 1938 broadcast exploits the vulnerability of the listener's own home. The outside world is brought inside, and the filter is entirely controlled by unseen voices.
Think about your own doom-scrolling habits today.
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly the psychological button Orson Welles was pressing. Listening to that 1938 broadcast feels eerily similar to when the algorithm on your phone, which you implicitly trust to curate your reality, suddenly starts feeding you nothing but apocalyptic, real-time disaster footage.
It is the exact same feeling.
The terror isn't just the aliens out there in the dark. It's the sudden, chilling realization that the medium you invited into your safe space can manipulate you, isolate you, and lie to you.
That is a perfect modern parallel. The 1938 broadcast weaponized the nowness of radio to create immediate visceral panic through deception.
But if we turn our attention to our third primary source, the 1955 Lux Radio Theatre production, we see a cultural landscape that has fundamentally shifted yet again.
A massive shift.
Because by 1955, the world had seen actual, literal apocalypse.
Exactly. Between 1938 and 1955, humanity hadn't just worried about war. They had lived through Pearl Harbor, the firebombing of Tokyo, Hiroshima, Nagasaki,
The Korean War.
and the terrifying dawn of the Cold War.
So the audience in 1955 didn't need Orson Welles to trick them into feeling fear. They lived with the daily, tangible reality of mutually assured destruction.
Which is why we have to treat this 1955 production with serious critical weight. It is not just an afterthought or a lesser remake.
It reflects a totally different psychological need.
Right. The format isn't a fake news broadcast anymore. It leans completely into Hollywood theatricality.
It operates like a cinematic movie for the ears.
Yeah, it is an adaptation of the 1953 George Powell film, starring Dana Andrews as Dr. Clayton Forrester, and it embraces a very clear narrative structure.
There's no trickery here. It starts with a dramatic introduction by the producer. It has a swelling cinematic musical score.
It gives us a heroic leading man, a romantic subplot with Pat Crowley's character, Sylvia, and a very clear three-act structure.
But why this shift? Because a population traumatized by the atomic bomb doesn't want to be tricked into a panic.
No, they want a structured, dramatic way to process the existential fears they already have.
They need a cathartic ritual.
Exactly. And look at how the script updates the science and the characters to fit the 1950s atomic age imagination.
Right, in the 1898 novel, the narrator is an unnamed philosophical writer.
And in 1938, the main characters are a panicked radio reporter and a rather helpless astronomer.
But in 1955, our hero, Dr. Clayton Forrester, is explicitly described as top man in astro and nuclear physics.
He is the man behind the new atomic engines.
So the scientist is no longer an observer. The scientist is the ultimate action hero of the Cold War era.
And the Martian weaponry is updated to match that atomic dread.
Yes. When General Mann asks Dr. Forrester how the Martian heat ray works, Forrester doesn't just say it's really hot.
No, he explains it in deeply terrifying 1950s atomic terms.
He says the heat ray neutralizes mesons. He calls mesons the atomic glue, which hold all matter together.
So the Martians aren't just burning things, they are unweaving the very atomic fabric of reality.
Why does that specific vocabulary matter so much to a 1955 listener?
Because unweaving reality wasn't science fiction anymore, it was the evening news.
The bomb.
The bomb. The concept of splitting the atom, of matter itself being annihilated in a flash of radiation, was the defining terror of the decade.
By describing the Martian weapon as an atomic disruptor, the writers tap directly into the dread of nuclear fallout.
Which necessitates an atomic-age military response.
Right. In 1898, the British used artillery. In 1938, the Americans used bombers. But in 1955, humanity unleashes its ultimate defense.
They deploy the flying wing bomber.
To drop what they call a thermonuclear bomb of octopus power.
Such a specific 50s phrase.
I know. They literally dropped the most devastating weapon humanity has ever conceived, an H-bomb, right on the Martians outside Los Angeles.
And it does absolutely nothing.
Nothing. The Martians just put up a transparent electromagnetic dome, and the thermonuclear blast washes over them without leaving a scratch.
The realization in that moment of the broadcast is profoundly bleak.
Dr. Forrester and the military men are watching from a bunker. The countdown ticks down. The bomb drops. There is the massive sonic impact of the explosion, and the observer simply looks through the periscope and says, "They're still there. They haven't even been touched."
Yeah.
I have to ask you, though, does this version actually feel more despairing than the others?
Why more despairing?
Because it proves that our ultimate world-ending technology, the thing we spent billions of dollars on, the weapon that defines our geopolitical reality, can't even save us.
It absolutely represents a deeper existential despair regarding technology.
Because the 1950s Cold War mindset was entirely built on the concept of deterrence, right?
The idea that having the biggest bomb keeps you safe. It was the only psychological safety net the culture had.
So when the Lux broadcast strips that away, when it shows the H-bomb failing, it leaves humanity completely naked and defenseless in a way that even the Victorian artillery failure didn't.
It proves that technological escalation is a dead end.
And adding to the sheer unbelievable surrealism of this despair is the commercial juxtaposition in the 1955 broadcast.
Oh, the commercials.
If you read the transcript of this show, right in the middle of Los Angeles being evacuated, right as martial law is declared and they're preparing to drop the H-bomb, the dramatic music fades out, and the broadcast abruptly cuts to a cheery announcer named Ken Carpenter pitching Lux liquid detergent.
It is a phenomenal artifact of mid-century American cognitive dissonance.
It really is. The announcer's saying, "It would be hard to find a man who works as many hours a day as you women do. You spend 5.5 hours every week just doing dishes."
And he pitches Lux Liquid as the next best thing to a dishwashing machine.
And later on, after the military is wiped out and humanity is facing total extinction, they cut to a bright, upbeat jingle by Les Paul and Mary Ford singing about Rinso Blue detergent.
If we unpack the mechanism of that dissonance, it reveals the bizarre duality of post-war American life.
You have the ultimate domesticity in consumerism.
The gleaming kitchens, the promise of leisure time, the obsession with clean dishes and bright white laundry.
Sitting comfortably right next to the threat of total atomic annihilation.
The apocalypse is literally interrupted by a soap commercial.
It highlights how quickly American society had to normalize the end of the world, packaging it as entertainment to sell dish soap, because the alternative was living in a constant state of unmanageable panic.
That thermonuclear failure in 1955 and the bizarre way society processed it forces us to look at the underlying assumption of all three of these eras.
The illusion that our civilization is actually secure.
That is the core theme running like a fault line through all three texts. In every era, we see the illusion of power.
Railways, ironclad ships, armies, newspapers, governments, scientists, massive cities, and sophisticated atomic weapons.
They all appear completely unshakably invincible.
Right up until the exact moment they aren't.
The Martian technology is essentially a dark, distorted mirror held up to human industrial progress.
You look at Wells's description, the 1898 text. The Martians have handling machines without wheels. They have heat rays. They deploy black smoke.
And anatomically, what are they?
Wells describes them as just intellects and brains.
They are practically just giant heads with tentacles.
They have no complex digestive system. They inject blood directly into their veins.
They don't sleep.
They have no sex, reproducing by budding. They have evolved away all the cumbersome animal traits, leaving only the brain and the hand.
They are completely devoid of compassion. They represent the chilling endpoint of pure, unchecked technological and evolutionary progress.
The terror isn't just that they are alien. The terror is that they are us, millions of years in the future, if we let our intellect completely devour our humanity.
And yet, despite this overwhelming intellectual and technological superiority, despite their ability to shrug off British artillery and American hydrogen bombs, we reach the paradox of the small.
Yes, the paradox of the small. Focus deeply on the ending shared by all three adaptations.
The Martians are not defeated by human ingenuity.
They are defeated by microscopic terrestrial bacteria.
The absolute greatest, most terrifying machines in the story are defeated by the smallest living things on the planet.
The Martians have no immunity to our diseases. As soon as they breathe our air and eat our food, they are infected. It is such a brilliant, humbling twist.
But it raises an important question about how we interpret this ending.
Right. Does it feel merely like a biological fluke, a lucky roll of the evolutionary dice, or does it awaken a deeper sense of mystery and providence?
It's fascinating to see how the different eras handle that exact question.
Look at the 1955 Lux broadcast. It frames the ending explicitly through the lens of faith.
Throughout the story, the character of Uncle Matthew, the pastor, represents the spiritual angle. And even after he is killed, Sylvia and Dr. Forrester end up hiding in a church as the Martians die outside.
The 1955 narrator makes it undeniably religious.
The script says, after all that men could do had failed, the Martians were destroyed and mankind saved by the littlest thing which God in his wisdom had put upon this earth.
It is a direct appeal to divine providence.
It's fitting for a 1950s America that was heavily emphasizing its religious identity in contrast to the state atheism of the Soviet Union.
But if you go back to Wells's original 1898 phrasing, it's much more grounded in naturalism, though it still has a profound sense of awe.
Wells writes that the Martians were slain by the putrefactive and disease bacteria against which their systems were unprepared.
Slain, after all man's devices had failed, by the humblest things that God, in his wisdom, has put upon this earth.
But then he adds something crucial.
By the toll of 1 billion deaths, man has bought his birthright of the earth, and it is his against all comers, for neither do men live nor die in vain.
Wells leans into the evolutionary struggle. Humanity earned its immunity through millennia of disease, suffering, and death.
The bacteria are our microscopic allies in the brutal, ongoing war of natural selection.
It implies that our deep connection to the biology of this planet is our ultimate shield.
I have to challenge this ending a bit, though. Think about what it actually means for the characters living through it. Is this ending actually a relief, or is it secretly terrifying?
How so?
Because if you really think about it, it means our survival had absolutely nothing to do with our courage, our moral superiority, our atomic bombs, or our intellect.
We were completely helpless.
We were saved by the dirt we walk on. That strips away all our agency. Does it feel cheap to you?
It is terrifying if you base your entire worldview on human agency and technological supremacy.
Right.
If your security comes from the thermonuclear bomb of octopus power, then yes, the ending is a despairing realization of impotence. It tells you that you are not the master of the universe.
But if you can embrace the humility that Wells is pointing toward,
it is a profoundly beautiful reminder that we are part of a vast, interconnected biosphere. We are not above nature. We are deeply reliant upon it in ways we cannot even perceive.
The very things we consider pests or infections are the guardians of our ecosystem. So, sitting here in the common room, looking at these three artifacts stacked on the table, we see humanity forced to confront its own fragility over and over again.
From the hubris of the Victorian Empire getting a taste of its own colonial medicine,
to the paranoia of the radio age where the trusted voices in your living room betray you,
to the existential dread of the atomic era where our greatest weapons are rendered utterly useless.
And in every single version, across every changing decade and shifting fear, the sheer beauty of Wells's extraordinary final reversal remains perfectly intact.
Humanity survives not because it evolved to become powerful enough to punch the invaders in the face.
We didn't build a bigger ship or a bigger gun or a bigger bomb that saved the day.
We survived because the ordinary, invisible, living world beneath everyone's notice was already there doing its quiet work.
When the great machines fail, what small things have we forgotten to notice?